Good morning, campers, and welcome to Day 2 of Security B-Sides Las Vegas 2021, Camp Stay at Home. First, a couple of announcements. Cabin 1337 is the winner of the Macaroni Pineapple Tower Contest. Way to go, you little hackers! You'll get to carry the spirit flag for the rest of the day. And second, this afternoon's canoe races, I know you were all looking forward, but they're canceled due to an unfortunate goose incident. I know, but buck up, campers. It's tuna hot dish day at the mess hall, so I hope you managed to work up an appetite in today's activities. We have got another full day of great conversations and presentations lined up, leading off with a genial tete-a-tete between our very own Jack Daniel and the man who was fired by a tweet, Chris Krebs, founding director of the Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, and now founding partner at the Krebs Stamos Group, a cybersecurity consultancy based out of Alexandria, Virginia, focused on helping organizations understand the threats they face and the role they play in the security of our wider society. So, let's all bring our best camp stay-at-home spirit as we find out what's top of mind and how many different topics Jack can fit into a single question. Have a great B-Sides day, campers!
Hey there, welcome to Camp Stay at Home, also known as B-Sides Las Vegas Remote. Wish we were together, but it's not safe for us to be together, especially in Las Vegas right now, so we're going to do this the responsible way. This morning we have a very special guest. I'm going to have a little fireside chat with Chris Krebs. Chris, you know Chris, but if not, founding partner at the Krebs Stamos Group, the co-chair of the Aspen Digital Commission on Information Disorder, former director at CISA, and fired by a tweet. And a couple of those bullet points give us a launch pad for this morning's conversation, which is Commission on Information Disorder and fired by tweet. Social media is amazing. B-Sides was founded on Twitter. It was built and expanded on Twitter. It was over a decade ago in 2009 when a bunch of us in the communities had a conversation about who was and wasn't speaking in 2009 at Black Hat and DEF CON, and we decided to do a little one-off thing, and that one-off thing is, closing in on 700 events globally. But as I'm sure all of you have noticed, and certainly you have noticed, Chris, all of the stuff on social media isn't all good, is it?
It is. I tell you what. Let me. The way I like framing this conversation or this topic is that Twitter, for instance, can be an incredible source of good, particularly in this community with open source intelligence, threat sharing. When I think back to WannaCry, at least from the U.S. government perspective, the real first indicators that WannaCry was happening, we picked up through Twitter. In fact, a former senior official flagged it for me. I kicked it over to what was then known as the NCIC, the National Cybersecurity and Communications Integration Center at DHS, now at CISA, and they ran it to ground. The same thing happened effectively a month or so later with NotPetya. We saw the indicators spilling out of Russia that getting in Ukraine being posted on Twitter, and so it's just an incredibly powerful platform for global detection of interesting activity. At the same time, a set of actors, particularly if we think back to 2016 and the election, the interference by the Russians, it was harnessed as a source for misleading and sowing confusion, sharing propaganda, undermining confidence in elections, things like that. And so when you step back and you think about disinformation and propaganda and trying to influence people's minds and subsequent behaviors, it's been around as a technique, as an MO for ages. The joke I make is that disinfo is the world's third oldest profession. We all know what the first oldest profession is, and then the second being intelligence collection, third being disinfo. So it's a problem that we've had to deal with for a very, very long time. What's different now is that social media, the increase in velocity of information is something we've never quite seen before. And so that has led to this emergence of really good behaviors, but also some that are more detrimental. Citizen journalists can be a great thing, but at the same time, when you create these alternate realities that people do their deep dives, I'm specifically talking about QAnon here, it can lead to outcomes that really skew the perception of reality. And then what you see is some of these participants going full bore into that separate reality. So what you end up with is the world where the majority of us live, and then the world where others live. And it's really hard to rectify those two and reintegrate. And so in part, what we're trying to do through the Aspen commissions, the Commission on Information Disorder, is try to look at some of the structural issues that have laid the foundations and groundwork for where we are right now in thinking about the collapse of local and regional journalism, the emergence of social media platforms and the lack of transparency in these platforms. I mean, think about you don't have visibility into the algorithms that some of the platforms use and why you're getting served up certain information. We think that's something that's worth examining, and perhaps certain requirements, whether legislative or self-regulation, to get that change, get more transparency. But then also, what is the role of government? I'm a firm believer in the First Amendment and my right, your right, everyone's right to get out there and say what they believe in, say what they think, but also the right to hear these things as well. But there does come a line where there are societal harms, and people that do share these things should and can be held accountable. When I think about that fired by tweet line that you mentioned, I was fired for effectively disputing claims that the 2020 election was rigged, was stolen, that a dead dictator from Venezuela had managed to get into a machine and change votes. And so I think that there need to be additional potential legal mechanisms that harmed and aggrieved parties can use to intervene. So again, stepping back, we're looking at these structural systemic changes across reducing harms, about increasing transparency in platforms and elsewhere, and then restoring trust, or at least building trust. And I think that trust piece is frankly going to be one of the hardest aspects of the commission, I think, to get really meaningful, actionable recommendations. I think transparency and reducing harms we can work out. Trust is really, I think, going to be the thornier thing, and I think that's echoed by a number of the disinformation researchers as well.
Yeah, that's a challenge. I think I don't know if this is a question or a comment, but I'd like your thoughts on this. One of the things that has been made clear to me is that some of the disinformation is politically motivated, but some of it is just is basically ad fraud. If we can get you to click on a story, you're going to land on a page. The page is going to have ad views, and T-Profit, I believe in an interview I did with him a couple of years ago now, he said it's subverting democracy for pennies on the dollar or something. I forget his exact quote, but it's like, we're not just up against cyber warfare or whatever you want to call this, or information warfare. There are some people who are just, hey, if we get a few thousand clicks, then wherever they are, probably in Eastern Europe, makes a difference in their life. And the fact that this is a multifaceted problem makes it even more intractable, I think. But what do you think?
I think you're spot on, and kind of the way I think about it, at least, is there's at least 5 different sets of actors out there. There are the groups that we always think about just natively on disinformation, and that's foreign intelligence services. There are also political activists, going back to propaganda and just election-related. I'm trying to get you to vote for my candidate. The third is the conspiracy theorists, and that goes to the QAnon piece. The fourth is at least when you're talking about the vaccine space, there's a vaccine anti-vax community that's separate from the conspiracy theorists. But fifth and finally, to your point, is just the profiteers, those that are looking to make a buck off a click. And the challenge, though, is that a lot of the times those 5 different sets overlap. And,
Right.
the Venn diagram can be pretty hairy when you think about it. And
Yeah.
what we're seeing, I think, is an emergence of law enforcement interest in investigations into that profiteering piece. And there was a report in the Washington Post a couple weeks ago in the Technology 202 where a former FTC, Federal Trade Commissioner had written a letter into the current commission saying, hey, the pandemic profiteers, you need to go look at these people. They're actively spreading misinformation about COVID and vaccines, and they're selling their own wares and their supposed therapeutics instead. And we need to take a hard look at that. And so my hope, again, going to that reducing harms piece that I mentioned earlier, is that there are additional law enforcement mechanisms where we can curb some of this harmful behavior in the disinformation space and really start isolating out what are the harder problems to solve. And if it just comes down to the hardest problem in disinformation is political speech, then that's fine. Then if we can just isolate and illuminate that, and in the meantime, we've been able to address the profiteers, some of the nation state actors, and some of the others along the way, then I'm all about reducing attack surface. I think just like everybody else.
Yeah, cool. So let's change the direction of the conversation a little bit, but something that this has brought up in my head, one of the things we talked about maybe discussing was, how do we get ahead of this? How do we get people more aware of the mechanisms for abuse and how to spot disinformation, which goes back to, where can and if so, where can our educational systems, formal and informal, starting in elementary school through high school and college, what can they do to better prepare, buzzwords or whatever, digital citizens, future digital citizens, make them aware of, basic things like protecting their privacy, basic security, beyond basic security, threat modeling, things like that, but also an understanding of this internet that we're going to or have already dumped them into with the lies and the threats. Where do you see opportunities in education, and what limits do you see on that?
How much time we got? I mean,
okay, you don't have to answer all of that.
No,
I just wanted to make sure that I gave you enough things where you figured you could answer a thing.
Jack, you're just killing me with these questions because they're some of the most timely and thorniest questions. First off, BSides just as an enterprise is on the cybersecurity side is, to me, one of those really shining examples of democratizing partnerships, democratizing education, democratizing access into the community. You don't have to shell out thousands and thousands of dollars to a conference to go network and meet people and things like that. BSides has always been globally an example of one of the best ways to immerse yourself into the ecosystem. And when I was at CISA, I would encourage our field force, and so it's little known that CISA has representatives across the country to attend as many different BSides events, present, set up a booth, engage, talk to people, hand out cards, recruit, expose folks to some of the training. That's one way. But more broadly, we do, as you point out, we have a challenge right now on the way that we, I think, educate. I've got 5 kids that are in grade school, and so I think about this a whole lot because I see what they're learning in school, and it's just simply it's not enough. It's certainly in the public school system in Virginia where I live. There's not enough digital literacy being provided to the kids, and the numbers don't lie. That when you provide opportunities earlier on, that opens up pathways, including just having an AP computer science class available tends to put people of color and women into specializations in college and on the technology side, which is I'm in the middle of building a company and trying to hire a very diverse organization that I think should be representative of the community and where we all need to go. And it's really hard. And we all have to do better. So we have to make more opportunity available in the grade school. And if that's a community issue rather than a school issue, then we need to tackle that as well. But it also, to kind of the earlier conversation on disinformation, the kind of the magic and the alchemy of technology and some of the systems that we use to support our daily lives, the fact that they're not transparency and they seem to look black box allows for a lot of mischief on the edge as well. So we not only have to educate so that we have people with more opportunities, we have to educate so that we can reduce some of the harms that are happening. Elections alone. I mean, most people, unfortunately, think that the election process is that you show up the morning of the election, you vote, and then you turn on the TV that night to your preferred network and you find out who won. But it's a system of systems. There are processes that happen before, during, and after election day. And we have to continue educating, or else people are going to take advantage of that, mysteriousness for their own, their own malicious intent. So how do we get there? I think for one, again, it's through the K through 12 system. We have to have more digital literacy. We have to have more awareness campaigns from the government, from our community leaders. One area that I've really been paying attention to as well is communities of faith. You have faith leaders that engage on a weekly basis and are seen as trusted advisors. And to the extent that we can bring them into the conversation about in a beneficial way, I think that can also help. But look, there's no single solution here, and that's really the challenge. It's the whole society issue. And again, I'll close out on the disinformation piece. One of the things that we did at CISA, this was in the summer of 2019. I think it was really one of the first, at least here in the U.S., one of the governmental awareness and education programs on disinformation, how to spot it. We released an infographic and a bit of a public engagement campaign called the War on Pineapple. And really what it was a 5-step, primer on here is how an influencer runs an influence operation. The first thing is they identify the issue that they want to manipulate. The second is they get the accounts in place. The third is they start amplifying the issue. The fourth is they get it to go mainstream, meaning they get it picked up by a network, a paper, or something like that, or someone that is an influencer. And then fifth and finally, they get it real world. They get it into a protest, a counter protest. They really start driving it on the streets. And the challenge that we had at the time was educating in a way that was engaging, that wouldn't immediately, engage the lizard brain and get people turned off or angry about the issue. And so we tried to find what's the most kind of like binary thing that you either love or you hate. And we went through things like whether you like salt and vinegar potato chips, whether you like cilantro, Texas barbecue, North Carolina barbecue. Where we landed was whether you like Hawaiian pizza, whether you like pineapple on your pizza. And that seems to be an incredibly binary decision. And it took off, and it's still, I swear, every time something comes up on the Twitterverse related to pineapple or Hawaiian pizza, I get tagged. Like, it just happens. A couple weeks ago was National Pineapple Day, and my Twitter mentions were a hot mess that day. So at the same time, though, it's a great thing. Now we've got this association. People think like, wait, what was that about? And you can start digging back in a little bit on disinformation. It gives opportunities to learn.
Cool. Yeah, the poor pineapple. It used to be the gift you gave for it was a symbol of welcome and
hospitality.
Hospitality. Yeah. It was great, and that's a fun one.
The only thing that I think pineapple belongs on cooked is Taco Al Pastor.
Okay, I'm with you there. I'm not a purist on pineapple on pizza. It's not my favorite, but I won't reject it if I'm hungry. You know, three or four in the morning in Vegas, if we were together and you put it in front of me, I'd probably go for it. But it wouldn't be what I ordered.
Yeah, that's one of those moments where I think most rules are kind of
most rules are Vegas. Man, I miss that. I miss seeing folks. Those of you catching this, I miss you. Really, I do. But let's not die. Let's see each other hopefully next year. So let's head in a different direction, and I want to talk about supply chain for a little bit.
Sure.
So this is nothing new, right? Supply chain attacks are not new. I think the scale and scope may be new. A lot of these things that cranky old men like me say, this is nothing new. I have to remind myself to say, but it's different now, or it's worse now. And once there is a motive, a lot of what we now call cybersecurity, whether it was information assurance decades ago or whatever, it was a whole lot more fun until people realized they could make a lot of money at it. And the consequences became a lot higher, and it was everywhere. You add in political subversion, you add in the various other motives when opponents or adversaries find motives for things, and supply chain is just ripe for attack, and it's a real challenge. So the cranky old man question is, why do we keep talking about it over and over and over? And less cranky old man thing is, what do we do about it? What are the first steps to make this less terrible?
Why do we keep talking about it? Because we still haven't done the basics, I think, and the basics are still hard.
Thank you. We haven't done the basics is something that gets said a lot. The basics are hard is something that a lot of people who haven't faced it in real world environments don't always believe. So thank you for saying that. The basics are hard.
Yeah, and then we kind of have to break down the economic mechanisms here that are involved to get to why the basics are still hard. And I think a lot of it is, we outsource. We've over the last 10 plus years, we've really, I think, kind of specialized and siloed and outsourced. And once you start shifting that third party risk, or you start shifting your risk management to a third party, and you say, well, it's not my problem, it's theirs. But that risk, all you've done is transferred it. And if that third party's not taking it seriously, then you still have that exposure. I think what has really happened over the last 5 years is that the adversaries have gotten it's probably some combination of smarter, lazier, and more efficient. And they understand that if they want to go, and it's kind of like the Willie Sutton thing. So Willie Sutton, famous bank robber, was asked, Willie, why are you robbing the banks? He goes, because that's where the money is. Same thing about supply chain, same thing about MSPs, same thing about enterprise software. What they're doing is they're going after the one-to-many points of leverage so that they can conduct breakout attacks. That's what we saw with SolarWinds. Kaseya, I think, is still a little unclear about exactly what that was about. It seems instead it was just a 0 day in a product. But you think back to NotPetya, MEDoc, the Ukrainian accounting software, that was a supply chain compromise. And so it just makes it easier for the adversary to get broader reach. And I think what we're really probably seeing with the more sophisticated adversaries, the SVR, the Russians, the MSS out of China, is they're shifting their their intelligence collection techniques towards a kind of, is one of my employees calls it, access everywhere. They are looking to turn the global software, the enterprise software and service industry into their own collection infrastructure. They're looking to harness it so that they can have access to whatever target they want at any time. And when you think about it that way, and it's like galaxy brain stuff, it's like, oh my God, they have enslaved this entire IT industry to that they can do anything they want at any given time. And you can continue kicking them out here, and here, but we're really chipping away at the edges. So we have to do a much better job, I think, on the intelligence collection side for the government, the U.S. government, and our allies, to try to get ahead of them before they get there. Find if we can't take advantage of their C2 infrastructure. But back here, we really have to shift hardcore into that detection, investigation, and response mode, and really take the hard part here. Just like we're still not doing the basics, and the basics are hard. Dividing out signal to noise is also really hard. And in the case of SolarWinds, when you think about what blew that entire operation open, was a SOC analyst at FireEye investigating an alert on a device enrollment. I mean, that blew up an entire global collection infrastructure. So it shows you that the power that we have in the SOC, but how do we move that detection further to the left, really move it hard left to boom, and so they don't get that deployment.
So related, you mentioned software, and software eating the world is an issue. But so here in the U.S. and there are other agencies around the world, Underwriters Laboratories make sure that the lamps here are safe and other appliances are safe. And do we need something like that for software? There have been a couple of attempts. And if we do, who is it? Do we ask UL to do that? Do we ask Mudge to go back to crank up that program? And in the tradition of giving you a lot to pick from, let's add the tangentially related acronym SBOM. Where does the SBOM fit into that, and does it? So there's another wide open path for you.
So software product liability discussions have been going on for quite a while. I think what's really different here about UL and some of the other compliance and attestation regimes on product safety is that in this case, we have an intelligent adversary on the other side of the product. And there will always be use cases where the designer, development, deployer, and maintainer will be like, there's no way I ever would have thought that could have happened. I mean, that is a crazy use case that results in a really bad thing. So I think that is, at least from where I sit, one of the really complicating factors of a product liability perspective. That said, we can absolutely demand better of our of software developers, of software engineers. And I'm not talking about the individuals. I'm talking about the companies, right? It's the companies that are rushing to market, that are focusing on features, and that are subordinating security. We've got to address that. And so that can either happen organically through the private equity space, the venture capital space, and the leadership space. And we're seeing, I think we're seeing glimmers and glimpses of that. But at the same time, the U.S. government has one of the most powerful tools here, and I'm not talking regulation, I'm talking the power of the purse. So the U.S. government is one of the largest consumers and buyers of software products in the world. I mean, the data that at least that I recall, it's dated, but like the Department of Defense is, I think, what is the single largest customer for Microsoft, at least back in the old Jedi Cloud days it was. But I mean, think about the sort of influence as a purchaser that you could have over someone that's delivering a product. When you set the terms, like, I need something that does this, 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 and this. And so what you saw back in May was the Biden administration issue an executive order that had all sorts of software supply chain security measures. You talk about SBOM. It was the first time we'd really seen that. It's not codified, but in an official document that said this is the way. And so we're going to go down this path. It's also going to have build environment requirements, testing requirements. it was really a pretty strong flex. The challenge, though, is going to be at what cost, and B, at the can we verify? Can we attest? Can we validate this? And in a timely manner. And I think some of the pushback, some of the feedback is like, oh, it's going to cost X amount of money, so the government's going to have to figure out how to sort that out through contracting. The second is that, oh, there's no way that small businesses can do this, and so you're going to stifle innovation. You're going to push all the money back up to the bigs like Microsoft and all that, which I don't know if I buy into that. I think we'll also always have to have exceptions and edge cases and figure out how to continue to push for innovation. But nonetheless, there's going to be a cascading effect there, that when the government says thou shalt to the big software developers, they're not going to have government SKUs where the code base is entirely different. And so that code base is going to be shared with commercial products. It's going to be the same thing effectively. There may be some bells and whistles and widgets on the end that are different. But it's going to have a cascading effect into industry. So we'll see, I think, safer, more secure products being rolled out to government, to industry. And so there should be security uplift across the base. That doesn't necessarily help on the implementation, the deployment, and maintenance side. So you still got to figure out that. But then to the broader question of how do you label, there are some pilot programs in that same executive order that I think the Department of Commerce is leading on, where they will look at what a security scorecard like rating would look like, so that you can, in a standardized, uniform way, differentiate on security. And I think that's a huge thing because the Brits have kind of dipped their toe in the water on this. Their DCMS, which is the Digital Sports and Media agency over there, tried to pull together a similar sort of thing with a labeling regime. And what it would really take, I think, here domestically is a massive retailer like Walmart, like Amazon, like Target to say full bore, every single product we sell has to have this sort of labeling so that when shoppers come in, they can pick up two things and compare it and say, okay, this one's $5 more, but it has this kind of security compared to this thing. That's what we're going to need. And so, like I said earlier, we're going to need some leadership out there in industry. And I'd love to see a big box retailer step up and change the game.
That would be fantastic. You used the word labeling a couple of times, which tickled a thought to which, one of the challenges we've faced in the field forever, if like me, I'm sure you've go back to some of the old reports, the Ware report and the Anderson report, the Risos report, and these other old things, and coming forward to today, we've struggled with a lack of a common lexicon. We have words and acronyms that don't mean the same thing. And I'm not just picking on the salespeople on the show floor at trade shows who abuse our language, but as an industry, we don't have a common lexicon. And this is one of those places where, at the risk of betraying myself, I'm actually a little bit optimistic. I think that the cybersecurity framework that was initiated at NIST was an interesting and good step. I think MITRE's attack framework goes a little further. I think there's hope. What do you think about that? If you go, to go back and now let's make fun of the people in sales. If you go to a trade show floor and ask them, can you just very quickly and simply explain to me threat, risk, vulnerability, exposure, a couple of these really basic terms we kick around. Can you do it? And if they struggle, that's fine. But if they completely conflate risk and vulnerability or threat and vulnerability exploitation, then people are making buying decisions based on listening to salespeople because, and don't make fun of people for doing that. As having been the harried administrator, I had to find resources where I could. And sometimes that meant, well, nobody else is talking about this publicly, so I'll ask the sales guy. So what do you think about that common lexicon, the challenges we've got, and our chances of moving forward?
I think I mean, let's give ourselves either a little bit of credit or a little bit of room to run, and that this is still a pretty young, nascent, immature field. And a lot of people are still, just like the field is growing up in it, is growing up, I think that people are still growing up in it. And to your point, the cybersecurity framework, which was a product of Executive Order, what was it, 13636? Anyway, it's an Obama administration thing. I was a part of the MITRE team that helped develop, got to go across the country back in the glory days where we traveled all across the country, holding workshops and extracting feedback. And that's just to point out, like, NIST didn't just spring from NIST's head what the cybersecurity framework was.
Right.
It was a series of workshops all across the country. And the feedback or the framework came from practitioners. Said these are the 5 areas that you need to focus on, and here are the sorts of sub-functions that you need within the framework. And so that's exactly how this should work. It should be stakeholder driven, consensus based. That's it's not immediately actionable, but at least it starts orienting. And the thing that I've seen the most is that boards of directors now are at least seeing things through the lens of the framework, and that's a great thing. Now, implementation, it doesn't go far enough. And so the MITRE attack framework, again, it solves a different problem. It's trying to look more at, on the adversary side, of how we cover down. The thing about the attack framework that I like is it helps start to rationalize security product investment and the impact of a security product. And can you cover down on this technique? And as techniques develop, what additional products I need? And that was the funny thing about when I was in USG, in the government was, there wasn't broad, widespread deployment of EDR and XDR solutions really until just recently. And that was in part spurred by some of the missed opportunities through, I think, the SolarWinds compromise, where you probably could have detected some of the host-based and network anomalous activity if you'd had a solution like that. But I remember about this time last year, maybe even it was in the spring, where we had pretty much mapped up the 101 federal agencies, and the amount of red out there across the framework was just like, But as soon as you drop an EDR solution on top, a lot of it went to a much healthier yellow or even green, and so that's. Those are the sorts of techniques and frameworks and ways to at least map things out a little bit that will help continue driving, the blue team, as well as communicating to leadership forward. So what's next, right? I mean, I saw MITRE just dropped a framework for ICS, for control systems, which I think is the other space that's, if you think, if we think we're nascent here, that community is still in diapers. And I don't mean that pejoratively at all. It's just the investment, when the eye of Sauron of Silicon Valley and the VC community starts looking at you, that's where you really start seeing acceleration. So, in my concern more than anything is, and you're seeing it, I think, now in some of the ransomware situations, is that the adversaries are starting to shift because there are more adversaries. The adversaries are starting to shift away from just data exfiltration. They're going to start moving towards functional disruption. And in fact, there was an alert that the U.S. government issued last week about Chinese, or 2 weeks ago, about Chinese pipeline, the Chinese cyber actors targeting U.S. pipelines. And that was all about control systems. And that was all about down the road, if they needed to pop off, a gasket on a pipeline to disrupt something locally, that they would be able to do it. So control systems is I think, going to be one of the most important areas that we focus on going forward. But again, it is an area that needs much more investment. It needs much more democratized security training. So I'd love to see a B-Sides equivalent for control systems, or at least tracks. I'm sure there are some out there, but that's an area where we need a significant amount of security uplift, because the investment, when you think about rural water, or at least municipal water facilities, there are like 30,000 of them, and they're rate limited. It's that is a space we need a lot of work.
Yeah, absolutely. Being down here in small town Georgia and driving through the rural South a lot, that we still have the rural electric cooperatives, the local water and sewer people, and they're under resourced. And I'd love that. If anybody watching wants to help make something happen there, reach out to me. I'm easy to find on that internet thing, and it doesn't have to be a B-Sides. I'm about building community. So if we can connect with people, let's do it. So where to go from here? Let's let's have a little more fun. There's a question I asked on a podcast I do with a friend, but do a different version of it here for you. It's a two-parter. Where do you get your news? Where do you enjoy getting your news? Favorite sources of news and things? And also related, is there a recent book you've read, movie you've seen, podcast you've watched, audiobook, tweet, whatever, something that has had a profound impact on your view of stuff, whatever that stuff is? And it doesn't have to be cybersecurity. It can be, it's changed the way you deal with your children, or it's changed your perspective socially or politically. So let's start with that specific one. Is there something that has really moved you in the past year or two that you've seen or read or heard?
Yes. And this, I some people might say that I'm, cheesy here, or some other, kind of a little too close to the pop culture themes. But I'm telling you one thing, at the time when this was right at the beginning of COVID, I'm running an organization. It's the first, it's 2,500 people. It's the first time I really had a significant leadership role. And I just, I didn't come up through the military. I came up in the policy space. I went to, a law school. And, there aren't a whole lot of opportunities out there for 2,500 people teams. And so I was, doing everything I could, but first just to build a management team around me that would help cover on some of the spaces where I was weak, on the administration side, on HR, things like that. But at the same time, trying to learn as much as I could, and so I'm on the plane all the time. So I'd grab Harvard Business Review, listen to the Learning Leader podcast and things like that. But what really shook me the most, and this is, I swear, this could be either, this is like clickbait or I'll just go with it. Ted Lasso, the Ted Lasso TV show, from a leadership perspective, is some of the highest quality TV that I've seen in a long time. Like, just don't focus on anything but how he leads that team. He doesn't know anything about soccer. He's an American football coach. He goes in there, he doesn't know anything about the techniques, but the way that he was empathetic and he got the most out of all of his players throughout, it was, there were little moments where I was like, I need to do that. How do I do that? What more can I do to be a more empathetic leader? And it was funny because the timing of that, as we went into COVID lockdown, and then on the heels of that with George Floyd's death and some of the protests and civil unrest over the summer, and then going up into the election, it really challenged, I think, every single leader out there on how do you make that transition? How, when you know that your workforce is scared, when they're worried about dying, when their relatives dying, and not just about COVID, it's because they're people of color. How do you meet them where they are and give them the information they need? And you're not going to save the day. Nobody believes that. But how can you listen? How can you learn? How can you help? And then you figure out those opportunities to lead. So, I think last year and even through today, right? I mean, it's been a really, really challenging year and a half going on 2 years for everyone. And so it's those little glimpses, those reminders of how to help, how to be a good leader. And so yeah, Ted Lasso for me, and they've got the second season now. I haven't watched it yet, but it just that was something that I really took to heart during COVID.
Cool, very good. That's the good insights. In that some people will bristle at the idea that the manager doesn't need to be an expert in what the team does, but I think there's real value in enabling your people, getting out of the way of your, whatever management jargon you want to use. If you, it also means you're not going to micromanage their technique. You're going to make observations like, when you do it that way, it works better for you and for the team. And when you do it this way, it doesn't work as well for you and doesn't work as well for the team. That might actually be easier to see if you're not an expert in that thing, whatever that is. So that's an interesting. On the more general things, I'm sure you consume a ton of varieties of media just trying to keep up as we all try to, fall behind as slowly as possible, I think is the way to look at our field. Where do you turn for quick hits and for deep dives?
It is, oh, wow. So I used to have the benefit, again, being in government, of a really tightly packaged intelligence update on a regular basis. We had clipping services where I could get all the top events and be able to kind of roll that in and quickly digest. So in the meantime, Twitter, I tell you what, if you can curate a good list of Twitter people you're following, it particularly because a lot of you people out there are prolific in commenting and getting information out there in a tight. So I tend to keep a pretty frequent review of Twitter and some of the commentators. Podcasts are another really good way. Risky Business and Patrick Gray's podcast is just outstanding. I've been known to make a cameo on his show, so he's great. Graham Cluley tends to run through things pretty quickly as well. And there's just a really good set of commentators out there. And then when you do the deep dives, some of the reporting on Wired, for instance, is great. Dan Gooden's a great reporter. Anything that Andy Greenberg writes, I think, is just outstanding. But beyond that, I do caution people, whether it's Twitter, whether it's the major media, you should read everything with a skeptical eye, that there are other sides of the story. And I'm not saying that this is a both sidesism thing or anything, but there's information, everyone has to deal with imperfect information, and we make imperfect decisions based on imperfect information. So you've got to allow for the fact that there may be additional information that you would have to adjust. So don't read an article and go hardcore on this thing or that thing. Allow for the fact that there are either external conditions or other pieces of information you don't have. So again, that's a little bit about humility. That's a little about empathy. And I'm as guilty of this as others, but spare us the hot takes sometimes.
Yeah. It's one of the keys for me for sources, and not to fanboy up, but we both respect Pat and what he's done with Risky Business, and there are several others. And the people who come back in the next episode or next article and say, "Well, we got that wrong," I'm way more likely to continue to listen to. Those who double down. Or just kind of hope that you don't remember what they said 2 weeks ago. That's a challenge. But like I said, different sources. So we're winding down, and I want to end on a better note. And this is also a borrowed question, but I really like asking it. So as we look at the cybersecurity landscape, as we look at the state of supply chain security and ICS security, and we look at the state of social media and disinformation, we're obviously screwed. But But
I'm not arguing.
Yeah.
It's just you put it out there so starkly.
But what gives you optimism? Where do you see progress, opportunity for progress that's realistic? What gives you optimism in spite of this situation that we're in?
I've touched on it a couple times, but what I am seeing is, and this is primarily through some of the speaking I do, but also some of the consulting engagements, is that the companies, the leaders, the business leaders, the CEOs that own, that run, that day-to-day manage organizations, those that understand that security is important and can be a differentiator, actually really achieve the outcomes that we all want. And so it's not about, you talked about marketing earlier. There's a difference between saying security is important and actually delivering on that. And so a CEO that says, we're going to take security seriously here, and then just tells the team, and the team's like, yeah, I got a day job, boss. I got to go do my day job. That doesn't get it done. You've got to have the follow through. So whether it's having someone that is empowered to pick up the ball and run with it, or you elevating the CISO or a product security person into a position that they can actually go toe to toe with the product feature team. It's those sorts of decisions and evolutions that we're seeing. And really what's happening is cyber, it's emerging from the basement of technology risk into business risk. And I'll say this, I think Colonial, I think JBS, I think those two events are gasoline in our hamburgers. I've said this before, I've been made fun of for saying it, but it really resonated in, I think, the American people. And relatedly, by the way, when the question you asked earlier that I didn't fully answer, that, typically the question is like, what do you like better, hackers or sneakers? The problem is all of those movies are so dated. When was the last time there was actually a decent cybersecurity related movie? When was the last time there was a decent cybersecurity related TV show? Mr. Robot was pretty good. It still wasn't accessible, right? It was still a little too technical. We have an opportunity right now, I think, particularly with ransomware, where everybody's like, I was impacted by that. That means something to me. We can unpack how complicated this stuff is from a business perspective. Show some of the trade-offs in the boardroom and in the C-suite. You can show how complicated it is on the actor side. And to your point about those, when we were talking about disinfo and the ad clicks, and it gives a couple bucks to somebody in Eastern Europe, that's exactly what's happening in Russia, right? You've got these ransomware crews that are making money when otherwise they would probably be in the streets protesting. And so it helps, it helps kind of tamp down on some of the discontent. Those are the sorts of things I think we can tease that out and really show how cybersecurity, about how technology is a part of everything that we do. And, are we screwed? I don't know if we're screwed. We're just going to be dealing with this for the rest of our natural lives, and probably as long as the human race continues to exist. Technology is here, and it will continue to evolve, and the risks associated will continue to evolve. So how do we manage that risk? It's not about eradication or elimination. It's about management.
Yeah, cool. Well, we're almost out of time, but I do want to ask you, is there anything you want to say, promote? Are there something we've missed, or something that has popped back in your head from our conversation? And if nothing else, where can people keep up with you and what you're doing and things like that?
We covered a lot of ground today, so I appreciate your skillful navigation of a whole range of issues here. I just want to say thanks to you guys, to Jack, you and Damon. I mean, that the BSides community. Again, this is about democratizing access, democratizing education and engagement in the community, and it's all over the country. It's all over the world. There's BSides Tel Aviv, a couple weeks ago. So, keep it up. I would, I love to be a part of this. And so thanks for having me. How do you stay in touch with what I'm doing? Check me out on Twitter, C_C_Krebs. You can check out my company's website, and that's pretty easy. It's ks.group. ks.group. We use the group TLD, which was kind of fun. But also keep track of what we're doing over at Aspen with the Disinformation Commission. There's going to be a number of recommendations that hopefully that everyone can pick up and run with. And where I want to be is part of the solution team, and there are no single solutions. There are no silver bullets. It's going to take an entire community. So, again, appreciate the opportunity and look forward to seeing everybody in person next year.
All right, great. Thank you so much for joining us. And with that, that's a wrap.